Hi, everyone. Welcome back to a new episode of Dare to be Fearless. I'm so hyped about today's guest because not only is she a friend of mine, but she is just the coolest self-made entrepreneur ever. May I also mention that her son is Princess Beatrice's stepson? I mean, how cool is that? Everyone knows my mom is British. So being able to say that like my friend shares a stepson with Princess Beatrice is just so effing cool. My mom freaks out because she's British. But anywho, before I introduce Dara into this week's episode of Dare to be Fearless, make sure you're following the show on social media at Dare, the number 2, Be Fearless, as well as my personal social media, which is at Alexa_Curtis. And if you want customized microphone covers from Chief Swag Officer, use the code ChiefSwag10 on chiefswagofficer.com for your first order. So Dara and I met last year. I actually ended up at a party at her house. A friend of mine in LA invited me, and I had no idea much about London or the society lifestyle there or the people there. I moved to London essentially blind. And so walking away from an event like this that was so intimate at someone's house that was so kind with a friend and also a mentor was so cool and speaks volumes to what England has been like for me just as a transformative experience being a business owner and just on a personal level. So welcome to the show, Dara, and make sure to follow and reach out to her on social media because I know she would love to hear from all of you after this episode.
This episode needs no introduction.
I don't even know.
Dara, I'm going to learn so much about you.
I mean, questions. I have so many questions for you.
Okay, my next guest needs absolutely no introduction. I love that you just like completely told me how to pronounce your name, Dara Huang. But you don't even know that it's pronounced that way.
It's
but
Dara Huang.
Dara Huang. I've been pronouncing her name wrong the entire time. You're like amazing. You're a mom. You're a designer. You actually have immigrant parents, which I'm fascinated by people who have immigrant parents.
I'm an immigrant parent too.
Yeah, it's a completely different trajectory. Like anytime I interview a founder who has immigrant parents, I feel like
I think that's why they're founders.
Yeah, maybe that's why.
Yeah,
and like,
we're totally like we're out, to kill. It's like do or die. It's sink or swim.
It must be something like that because your parents were like that.
Yeah, exactly. My dad always said if you have a foreign face, you have to work harder than everyone else because automatically you're discriminated against,
Okay, so you grew up in Florida.
Yeah, I was born and raised in Titusville, Cape Canaveral, where NASA is, and then we moved to Orlando. And then my parents are still there. So, yeah, Florida's home,
What was it like for you growing up? Because I think when people see you now, I mean, you're like this mega mogul.
Oh,
you're connected to the
thanks.
royals. I mean, but you're the coolest, like, normal person.
I would say growing up, it was hard. I think, we grew up in, like, Central Florida, and people weren't really used to seeing foreign faces. And it's, like, very, kind of like Baptist, Caucasian, sort of like that. Like there were no Jewish kids, definitely no Muslim kids. Or if they were, they would never tell anybody. There's probably like 2 Asian kids. And so I feel like there was a lot of kind of underlining racism. I've seen jokes about this a lot and they do make me laugh. But the point is, I do feel like I was a little bit shy. I kind of grew up feeling like I wasn't pretty and that I didn't have like a voice, or if I even thought I did, it didn't deserve to be heard. So I think there was a lot of hurdles growing up being different, even like from the types of food you eat to, when my parents spoke to me in a foreign language, I found it like very embarrassing. So there was like there was a lot to deal with growing up.
Did you go to public high school?
Yeah, I'm like a public school girl all the way until I got my master's degree. And then we used to have Facebook groups called like I went to a public school because everybody comes from Ivy League.
Okay.
And it was kind of funny. I'm kind of like self-deprecating in many ways. So I always found things like, coming from a public school or like my parents were academics, so we didn't have a lot of money. But I always found those things to be kind of part of who I am or kind of funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, it's like the work hard, improve yourself mode.
Do you feel like the way that you grew up, and because, I mean, your dad was working at NASA, which is like that's a pretty big job. That's a good job.
Yeah.
That you had to prove yourself or work to prove yourself harder?
I don't think people thought NASA was cool in like, I was born in the 80s. So back then, like having the space shuttle, like, I mean, you're probably born in the 90s.
97. Yeah.
So when you're in the 80s, like watching the shuttle go off was kind of like normal. No one thought NASA was cool, basically. It wasn't until the government stopped the space program, which was probably like around the like 90s, 2000s. In the 2000s, they stopped the space program. They stopped funding it. So not completely, but it really dwindled down the space program. It wasn't until Elon Musk came and decided that we're going to explore space again. And it was really interesting because he said there's things that are inevitable that we need to power. For example, you run out of oil and gas, you power it with like battery powered or electric cars. But space is not one of those things where you're like, we have to go there. Like you go there if you want to go there and you're curious and you want to explore things. And so the fact that he kind of reignited that exploration for space. And then when I was, my dad took my son to Kennedy Space Center, and he was describing like the difference between, there was like a Kennedy Space Center NASA launch pad. There was a SpaceX launch pad. Like, he was like telling us like the difference and how they collide and how they work together, how they're separate entities, but that there was this reignition into space, which made it cool. And I guess my point is, being a kid of the 80s, it wasn't cool. It was just normal. It was normal. Yeah. So we would like hide under our desks. Not hide, but it was like a drill. Yeah. We like go like this when the space shuttle goes off.
That's
and the
so
whole
cute.
room rumbles.
Yeah, yeah.
It was just normal. It was like part of life.
Did you know at that point that you wanted to do something creative?
No, I don't think there was a link to that. I think the only lineage that came from like my father's was just his work ethics. Who was like, he worked super hard. He was one of 9 kids who could afford to be educated, and that kind of paved his way to going to America and being able to provide for his family back in Taiwan. I mean, again, he was an academic, and I mean, when I hear his stories, I really admire them. I think I took it for granted when I was a kid, but the more that I'm an adult and I have a child now, I realize like, wow, he worked so hard and did so much for us. I just wish I could be like half the person my dad is. Do you know what I mean? It's amazing how much how hard he worked to get to where he was. I feel like that work ethic is what he passed down. He's like, listen, I want you to be an independent. I want you to make your own money. I don't want you to rely on other people. So he just always pushed education. And then I think work ethic kind of just naturally came with that. And I guess it was seeing how hard he worked, but it was also like very driven. It was like self-driven, self-propelled.
Isn't it also very common though in like Asian Chinese communities that you?
I was about to say I did not have what do they call them, like dragon parents, or what do they call tiger?
Not
moms?
Helicopter parents.
Tiger moms.
Okay.
I didn't have that. I oddly had parents that were really hands off.
Really?
Yeah.
Why? Because they were so busy, or they just weren't concerned about you?
I think it was just the mode of parenting. I think Asian culture in general is like one and removed, where they don't really like say like, I love you and I'm proud of you. Like there's no expression of emotion, which is weird because I never felt more loved than I do by my father. But I think it was kind of like the lack of, like, they don't get into your personal life. They don't ask you personal questions. They don't talk about, like, their jobs or work. It's just very, like, one-off and removed. And so, in a way, it's like my parents really played that role of mom and dad. Do you know what I mean? There was no, like, talk about his job or mentorship. Or he was basically my tutor in school, like math and sciences. And my mom was, like, she was a working mom, and she worked very hard. But she was also, like, kind of like cleaned my room and like made me, it was like a very like parental relationship. So they just never really got into, I see the relationships now and I don't know if they're good or bad, but they never asked me personal questions. They never really pushed me. It was funny. I had a weird way to rebel against my parents. I would be like, I'm going to get, A++ to, because my dad would be like, an A's not good enough. It has to be an A+. And I'd be like, I'm going to do better. I'm going to get extra bonus points just to prove you wrong.
That's so cute. Yeah, yeah.
So I think it was self-propelled. But my parents never like pressured me. They used to do weird things like say you can't spend the night at your friend's house because it's very like cultural not to burden other people.
Oh, got it.
And they took me out of like sports and like student government, things that like other parents would push you to do, like sports and class council. They were like, no, don't do that because it's a distraction towards, really they just cared about like education, getting to college, like test scores. They're like, we want you to focus on your studies. Yeah. But they weren't really pushy.
If there was someone watching this right now who has immigrant parents and wants to pursue like a life like you have, what advice would you would you give to them if they were younger, maybe late teens, and their parents are really hard on them and say want them to follow something really traditional, but they want to be like you?
It's really hard. I feel like every generation, people have different advice. It was really funny because I was watching this like meme on Instagram, and it was like our parents, when they found love, they would have been like, listen, the person's responsible, they can afford to take care of us, and we're gonna stay together and do this because that like our family is like our responsibility. And then you go to, so that was like the baby boomers. And then you go to the millennials, and then you go to Gen Z. And then it was so funny because the next one, which was like, look, we have similar ideas. He has a great job and he's super ambitious. So he's going to be a great, catch and partner. And my point is like, our opinion about our kids totally change. So when my parents were with me, they were like, they did, kind of persuade me to pursue certain paths that they thought were correct. Like they were like, we would like for you to go to Chinese school. We think that you should speak and be able to understand Chinese, which is great. I'm so happy I do. I do a lot of business in China. It's great, And then when it came to like what we want to do in school, they would influence like courses that they thought were better. But now it's like with my son, I'm like, do whatever your heart desires.
You're that kind of parent?
Oh, yeah. I'm like, what do you want to do? And then I'm like, how are you feeling? And there's all this talk about like all this crap. And I actually think that, it's starting to like turn around on itself. And it's like, stop feeling so sorry for your kids because it's actually crippling them, and tell them to toughen up a little bit.
Yeah.
Stop talking about their feelings all the time,
Yeah.
So I think parenting's really hard. I don't really have the answer to that. I don't know why I came out the way that I am, because I have a sister who's only 3 years older than me, and she's like the pure opposite of me.
She a nurse? Doctor?
No, she works in like business administration. Okay. She's a 9-to-5er. It's not a career, it's a job. She wants to get her paycheck and like clock off.
Yeah.
And just like she's like a soccer mom. Like she doesn't want, she doesn't really have like pursuits and like passions. She doesn't have like that big vision. She's not trying to like change the world,
Yeah.
That's like definitely me.
But think also a lot of people are like that because it is so hard to be an entrepreneur. I mean, you're completely self-made.
I mean, I think my sister, it's funny. My sister is different in me in so many ways. And we're both Virgos. We're both born in September. Like I can't even... And maybe it's because I'm the youngest and she's the eldest, so she was always the responsible one, and I was always the one taking risks because I knew someone was taking care of me if I went the wrong way, you know what I mean? So I do think that there's kind of like a pecking order, and there's a lot of things at play. I mean, I pursued architecture against my parents' wishes. They were like, we were thinking like typical Asian jobs, like doctor, nurse, engineer, like lawyer. And in America, those are like high-paying jobs. Of course. And architecture kind of falls in just like dead last, But I also think that I grew up drawing. There's not really much else I could see myself doing. And my parents were just like, we cave in. Just do whatever you want.
Where did you go to school?
I went to University of Florida for my undergrad, and then I got my master's at Harvard, which was the first time I went to a private school. And that's why I said we were like the public school kids in private school. And so it was a completely different experience. I think both experiences were very good, but I couldn't believe like the disparity in like the two schools. It was pretty. I mean, I'm glad I went to Harvard. I think people go there for different reasons. Some it's like they want it on their CV, and then other kids, and I think I probably fall into this. It's like I didn't have a lot of privileges, right? Like I didn't have like rich parents that were super connected that could like get me any job. So I had to go to Harvard. I needed their name brand, you know?
Yeah, I get it.
But I also think that whilst I was there, I didn't take it for granted that I was there because we couldn't afford to go to a fancy school. So I had to go to a Florida school because at that time, like Jeb Bush had put in a law that's like if you got straight A's and a certain like SAT score, you could get a free ride in Florida. And then when I got to Ivy League schools, I had to get a full ride there too because we just didn't have the money. And so that fact made me, I think, appreciate the fact that I was there a little bit more, and I absorbed it like a sponge, and I learned so much about not so much what you're learning, but how you learned it. Like it changed the way I thought about design, about like what I was looking at, how to take it apart, how to build a concept, how to reconceptualize it. It was more about like ideas than it was execution. So in like the real life, you learn how to execute. And I also learned how to run a business. But I think in school, especially if you're going for like, what do they call it? Not literature, but
Not architecture.
liberal arts. What the hell does that even mean?
It's a degree for the
Yeah,
trust fund
exactly.
kids.
Whatever.
You didn't study liberal arts, did you? I'm going to offend anyone who's like, I'm not a trust fund kid and I studied liberal
I'm
arts.
telling you, they're gonna highlight this and like put it in the Daily Mail. And Darren,
Wait, so you're at,
liberal arts.
did you feel like a fish out of water at Harvard? I mean, how did that feel?
I did, but not for the reasons that you're thinking of. Like, I think that there's a lot of stereotypes for certain pedagogies, such as like engineering and architecture, that fall true. Everyone does wear black and like came from New York and they're very dark and they wear like thick glasses. And here I am, I'm like popping out like a sunflower. I'm like, hey guys.
Were you always that confident?
No, I wasn't confident. I'm just cheerful. You know what I mean? Which I later learned that was like really great for building business development. Really great because it's all about like how you interact and like your chemistry with people. And if you're just kind of like this like dark designer, like you're not gonna like vibe with people well. But one thing that I think surprised my peers was that like in school, I even though I looked like a fish out of water and I didn't wear all black all the time, which I do now. But anyways, at the time I didn't. I was top of my class, you know.
So you're very smart, like book
I
smart.
wouldn't say I'm very smart. I think architecture is different. I think it's more a combination of creative skills, portfolio. It's more than just like there's different types of students at Harvard. There's ones that like want to get their PhD. So I mean, they could like talk you under the water about like theory. I was never that. I was always like someone who knew I was going to go practice. I was someone who like always built. When I say built, I meant like a project. I'm not building, obviously. I'm a student who like built to get to a completion or like a result. And not every designer is like that. It's very theoretical, basically. So there's different types of students. But I was at what I was doing, which was design. I was doing really well. I even skipped the first year in what they call advanced placement, you know, and I was winning a lot of the scholarships. And so I think that even though I looked different and act different, I think that did kind of put a small divide between me and the student body. But what was weird was after we graduated, they kind of came back and messaged me and was like, by the way, I really like you. We didn't talk much in school. I'm like, yeah, this always mean to me.
Yeah. This always happens. I find this even if you're from a small town. They're like all working at Starbucks and then they want to be your best friend.
Well, I mean, I think that, I think I've always been a little bit of a fish out of water in that sense. But then I always kind of found my way, and then people more for whatever reason would grow to respect that later, you know? So I think you got to kind of follow your gut and follow your heart about things. Like take the path less taken. Like I decided to be an architect, but unless you have to do something you're passionate about or else you're never going to be the best. That's just the truth. Like if, you know, they told my sister to go into like computer science because
nerdy.
My dad was an engineer. You know, he was an engineer. He was he was a rocket scientist, and he's like, technology is the future, which is true. But I don't think my sister's heart was like, I want to be in data science. You know.
But what if you don't know what to do?
Well, I think that's really common. I think I was lucky because if God gives you a talent, then you got to use it or else it's a waste, because like my mom's really religious. I'm not saying I am, but she's like, isn't the world so beautiful? God gave everyone a gift to do something really well so that we could all work together and create this beautiful world. I'm like, Mom, that's gorgeous, But if we were to like take that apart, it's really true. Like if you're given this gift to design really well, you just have to do it, But then it's like my sister, she wasn't really, I'm not saying she was born without talents. I think she has many talents that I don't have, But I wouldn't say there was one that she could transform into a profession. I would say she's good at what she does, but I don't think she's just not wired to like love it, you know.
Can you acknowledge some of the brands as well that you've designed for?
Sure. I mean, we've designed for a lot of brands and hotels. Like, we've done work with Four Seasons, with Waldorf Astoria, with Cartier. They're probably still our main clients. We're doing Nihi hotels with Chris Birch, which is really fun right now at current. We got a really big client that you would know the brand, but I can't really say the name. Although it depends on when this is aired.
I think in 3 weeks.
In 3 weeks. I don't know. I guess I shouldn't say anything in case they sue me. But we've worked with mostly luxury brands. The only like non-luxury brand, which I still think is luxury in terms of fast food chains, we're working with this Joe and the Juice.
I love Joe and the Juice.
Fun. I know, I love them too. It's really kind of sickening because they're my clients, so I travel to the Gulf eating them day and night, and then I still choose to go back there and eat there.
Do you get it for free?
I do, only because I was given a bunch of credits, and we have like a corporate discount. But I mean, once my credits run out, I don't know. Should I ask for more?
Either ask for more. There's got to be also another. Like, there's maybe a better.
I'll ask for more. I'll give them a quid pro quo. I'll be like, listen, I'll like, market you on, everything's a deal. Ask Brooke everywhere we go. I'm like, listen, let me give you a little advice as an entrepreneur. I'm like queen of sales, okay? Mm-hmm. And I also say this too all the time. You're never going to pitch something where they actually need it, ever, okay? Like unless they came to you, they don't need your services. So every time I walk into a situation, I make the deal up on the spot. So then you're like, well, how do you do that, right? So let me give you an example. I have so many examples. So, for example, I've had like at least 4 art brokers contact me being like, oh, I have some artists. I want to show you them. And they send me a portfolio. They're in price ranges of like $7,000 to $27,000. And I'm just like, yeah, when we need you, we'll let you know, which is the most common answer you're going to get from anybody. When we need you, we'll let you know. And then you know what happens? You go in some file in the back, and then by the time they need someone, they don't remember your name. You'll never get a call back. This is not the way you approach business, okay? If any art broker, and if you're listening to this out there, art brokers, if you came to me and you made up a deal and you made it attractive, I would say yes. So this is how that would go. If I was an art dealer pitching to myself, okay, I'd be like, hi, I've been watching your social media for a number of years. I notice you have a beautiful home that you use for social media. I want to bring your attention these 3 artists that really match your interiors. I'll hang it there at 0 cost to you. And if you sell that piece, I'll split it 50-50 with you. I'd be like, come tomorrow. Hang it up. Let's see how it goes. Like, we got a deal. We'll sign a contract. Like, that's how you make deals up on the spot.
Instead of being like, I would love to introduce this. Okay, that's really good to know.
People need to think, what does the person sitting in front of me want? I do that day in, day out. And it's not even just like, what do they want? Like, on the spot. You have to listen. I do, this is an interview, so I'm doing a lot of talking. But most of the time, I'm doing a lot of listening. And usually I'm talking to some, some billionaire, some CEO, some royal family member in like the Gulf, And they don't intimidate me because I know that I am probably the best person to give them something they want, even if they don't even know that they want it yet, you know? And so I think my best skill set is really like making the connections between things and like really being able to not network to help me, but to help them. Because what happens is that builds trust and camaraderie. So the next time they need anything, guess who they go to? Me.
You're very authentic, I think, in the way that you do that and you build community. I also feel like you really
Totally.
trust people who you meet. Is it
Oh,
a
yeah.
vibe that you get from them, or you just like everyone?
Oh, that's a really good question. So I think it's natural for us to, there's two things. It's kind of like we should aspire to be with people we want to be like. We should position ourselves where we're surrounded by people that where we can like help each other. Do you know what I mean? So I think that I probably surround myself with a real mix of people, and one of them is like people of influence. And so I think when I'm building chemistry with somebody, I'm super aware of again, how it could be a mutually beneficial relationship. And that's kind of tricky. I want to tread on that very carefully, because I also don't think that life is so transactional, and no transaction happens immediately or even with the first 3 years, and maybe not even the first 10 years. So what I'm saying is like you have to build a real network of like people that you trust. You could lose it in literally 2 seconds, and you have to be careful about who you invest that time in. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course.
So like, listen, we're all gonna have our best friends that like do nothing but eat pizza all day, and that's totally fine. I'm not saying that like you only should be friends with these people and do this and this and this. I'm just saying that like you need a variation. It's kind of like in life, you know, it's like you need to like mix your pie up. It can't be like all about your husband or all about your job or all about your friends. You need to like cut it up, you know? And you need like a good mix.
What's your best piece of advice for someone who wants to, like, say, enter into the world that you've entered into, not having come from money and connections? How do you get your
That
foot
would
in the
be me.
door? How do you get your foot in the door?
So I'll tell you how I did it. And I don't know if it's the best way to do it, but basically, like, every time someone says they want to be an entrepreneur, I always say, like, don't chase money. Just don't do it, because money does not come quickly. It's like an overnight sensation took at least 7 years. At least.
Do you
I would
believe
say
that, even with this day and age of social media?
1,000%.
That helpful, yeah.
Yeah. I mean something with longevity. I don't mean like, I don't know, something
This
like,
viral stuff that I hate that, because it's not reality.
well, I was born in the 80s, guys. You know? So I think that like the problem with Gen Z, is that where we're at right now? Is that there is a real like I want it now sort of mentality. And it's just, I guess I've always been a person who's like a block builder. So it's like you still have to build blocks. And in a way, it's like we are all our own personal brands, and we are building those even if we don't see it yet. So like I worked for a slew of people before, but as a result, like my company now does those slew of things that I did before, right? So I worked for a CGI artist, and I worked for a sculptural lighting chandelier artist, and then I worked for an interiors company, and now what do? We do lighting sculptures. That's what we sell to Cartier around the world. We do interior design, so we're doing all these hotels and all these like fancy luxury interiors now. And then we do our own CGIs in-house. That came from working with other people and like building that visual eye. So it's like what I think is the wrong way to do, and I see a lot of young people to do this, is like, that didn't work, try something out. That didn't work, try something else. No, start building blocks, because if you have to keep taking blocks away and starting all over, you're not going to build enough to like get to the top, right? Whatever that top is. And that top is really just like formulating yourself, you know? So even in my failures, like I was fired from my job twice. No, it was just once. I was fired from my job, and that forced me to try being an entrepreneur, right? It forced me to try different things But that built my company. So I always say, like, even if you're in a place where you're not supposed to be, the universe is going to like reposition yourself. If you're with someone you're not supposed to be with, if you're in a bad situation, if you're, and whatever it is, the universe will show you this is not where you're supposed to be, and it'll resurface. Like, I was never meant to work for corporate, and I think that's where I failed the most.
Is that how you got your foot in the door originally?
Yeah. I mean, I think, when you go to a school like Harvard, what do? You apply to the fanciest firm you can find. So I did. And then after that, I applied to the second fanciest firm I can find because I'm like CV building, And then I think the thing is, when it comes to entrepreneurship, is it's not school. It's not like step 1, step 2, step 3, and then like work for McKinsey, and then, do you know what I mean? And like build your CV and then go to Goldman Sachs and, and climb a ladder. Because what happens is like your true self starts to come out, and you start to realize that like, oh, I'm not meant for Goldman. I didn't realize I wasn't meant for corporate. And do you know why? It's because I'm so good. I actually am really good at sales, right? Which they're not going to put a junior architect on a client-facing, go close that deal position. And I'm also really good at vision. And again, being the person drawing the stair detail is not going to lead a team in which direction they think they should go in.
For
right?
sure.
So I think that because I'm I have ADHD, so I'm kind of a big picture thinker. And it's really hard for me to actually get in the details. But when you come out as a junior, you're working on the details because like nobody else is there to work on them or to look at them because the top people are too busy thinking about top level things. And I was young, but I was always a top level thinker, I guess, and a top level doer. But I didn't even know that. I didn't know what business development was. I didn't know what it meant to like make a deal. What is a deal? What does that mean? I didn't know how to run a business. So when I was fired from my job and I ran my own company, the first thing we got, like just like flooding our doors, was clients. I'm like, where did this come from?
When you
And
started
PR.
your own?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
And it's because, like, my first tip, guys, do not think about money. You have to do what you love. You're like, but what do I love? Right? I mean, everybody loves something. I think another part, sorry, I keep jumping around, but I think another issue with Gen Z right now is like, I want to say Gen Z. I'm not trying to like narrow anyone out here, but I do get a lot of like people like, for example, I love photography, so I want to get into photography. And I'm like, wait, no, it needs to come from the ground up. Do you know what I mean? It's not like it's just like one day I'm like, I love design. It was like I literally like slit my wrists for 8 years in school. I've interned for free in New York. When I was living in Florida, I slept on a floor. Like I literally.
These are the things you have to do.
You have to do it. You have to do it. So it's like you have to take off like any sort of like self-imposition. It's hard too, because I think right now so many people are entrepreneurs. So many people are building their platforms on social media. I don't think social media is like the answer. There's so many people. They asked a school, like, what's your dream profession? And they said to be an influencer. I'm like, how sad
They teach
is
this
that?
also as a degree now
This
at
is
UConn.
so sad.
Yeah. Why do you think that's sad?
Because I think there's a fallacy to what it is to be an influencer. The truth is, it's not steady. Like, look, nothing is steady. I'm an entrepreneur. Like, I'm still closing deals to like, bring in jobs, but I don't think it's for everybody. It's not steady. It's not consistent. It's not reliable. It yo-yos. Prices for influencers have fluctuated so much from lockdown to now. And I think that people are getting smarter with social media. They're realizing, like, during lockdown, I mean, I was, paid pretty hefty sums for like a singular post for like a brand. And then they realized it wasn't about a singular post. It was about consistency. So then they realized that they could get consistency across the board with a lot more people paid in much lower rates. Do you know what I mean? And by the way, this is going to keep fluctuating, right? So how can we... Like, think about how steady our parents were, right? They probably still have cash in the bank. They bought their houses, like, and then all of a sudden you're coming to a generation who's got like student debt, like inconsistency, and then they want to be influencers. This is like all over the place.
I also, when I think of an influencer, I think it's because I started my career so young in 2011. So I've seen back in 2011, the only people at Fashion Week were like buyers and editors and celebrities. You didn't have influencers or content creators. You, to me, are like an actual influencer. You have a brand and you have validity and people can trust you, but you're not someone who's like gone viral for no reason, right? Like if you post a pair of, I know you work with Stuart Weitzman, like boots, I know that you actually love it because you're a human. You have more than just the page.
Yeah, that's
Whereas
very sweet.
I think these other people who get this viral fame, and especially they're younger and they're posting these things and they're getting paid for it, it's just like a rat race.
It's also such a small percentage. Do you know what I mean? Like, I think people tend to compare themselves and they're like, oh my God, but this girl got paid like X million and she's just, you know, like whatever. And it's such a small percentage, and they're so replaceable by the next 17-year-old girl, you know, that I think that people have to be a little bit smarter about how they decide. And again, it's about like long steps, not like quick ones, you know, about how they end up like, let's say, building their blocks to get to whatever it is they want to do. But I think work ethic is also something that's always going to be the backbone of whatever you do. It's like work ethic. It's like you really, you know, it's really like you have to, push comes to shove. You have to keep going. You have to, you know, be positive about it. It's hard.
So hard.
It is really
You
hard.
mentioned something about like people who pivot a lot and people who
Yeah.
are like, oh, this didn't work. How
Yeah.
do you know when the right time is? Like say someone's like, well, I've been doing this for 2 years and
Yeah.
it's not working. Do I pivot now? But maybe they just pivoted.
You know what's funny is I keep meeting people, and now not just young, but old, who are like, I'm looking for the next thing to do. And they weren't losers. Like some of them sold their company for gazillions. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Even like people like really dear to me, like my business partner, who's the most successful person I know, is 72, and he's like, I want to start a new business, you know? And I think what I realize is that everyone's like, what happens in the end, or who we end up with, or where we end up. There's no end. Okay? Life is it's an experience, and we're going to try and do different things, you know? And when it comes to pivoting is, it might be something that people do forever. And I think, you know, I think what's a blessing and a curse is that like my talent is design. So even if I had no job in design, I'm still a designer. Do you know what I mean? So it's not like I can really pivot out of being like a designer. It's like saying I can pivot out of being Asian. Well, I just am. So I can't really pivot out of that. You know what I mean?
Keep changing your name, Dara.
Yeah, exactly.
We never know. We never know.
Exactly. So I think that and maybe this is a good point. I don't think it's so much about people pivoting into something different. It's always about, and everyone says this, when you're an entrepreneur, you have to know your strengths and your weaknesses, right? I know my weaknesses. It would be in finance, in legals, and detail-oriented things that are dealing with like operations. I'm not good at that. Thank God I have a good operational team. And but what I'm good at, like I said, is like vision.
Yeah.
Right. So like creativity, vision, design, and I'm good at sales. So if I wanted to pivot into fashion, if I wanted to design bags, if I wanted to do, it's still taking my two strengths, which is really like sales and marketing and let's say PR, whatever. And also I'm really good with vision. And vision goes a long way. Like I built my first team, not even giving them a guaranteed salary. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And these were not people that were like wandering the streets. My first hire came from UVA and Bartlett. She had a master's from Bartlett. And she had a job offer from like SOM, which was like one of the biggest corporate companies. It was SOM or I think it was KPF. And I said to her, I have a huge vision for us, and I don't have any money to pay you right now. But if you come with me, you can like, I'll let you set your own salary, which is what she did. So by our second year, we grew from 8 to 16. By our second year, she was my basically like my right hand woman. She was a woman. She was fresh out of school. She was writing all my contracts. She set her own salary. I think she was definitely the highest paid 23-year-old girl that like any of us knew. And we did that for like 7 years, you know? And then she started her own company after 7 years. But I actually don't think it did so well because she was missing vision and business development.
And you have that.
Well, I say a business is 3 parts. It's operations, like product. So it's like it's like what you make, what you're selling. And then it's like the ability to get the money, whether it's like business development or PR or comms or whatever. And these 3 points make a business. So you can't be really good at operations without a great product. You can't be really great at a product if you're not pricing right and collecting the money. You need money to run a business. And you can't have good operations and money and product, but you can't sell it. You know what I mean? Because as I know, you could create the most amazing thing in the world, but unless editors are writing about it or it's like viral on Pinterest or you can get it out on some sort of media, whether it's like social, print, or television, no one gives a shit.
How did you get your first customer?
A friend. So your first customer will always be a friend because you're their best option. You're the cheapest, you're the most passionate, and you have the most dedication, and you have the stripes to do it, right? So back to the question you asked me a long time ago, what do I tell entrepreneurs? I say don't go for money, but you do have to get rid of your rent because, as you know, in London, it's a sad city, but it's super expensive. And there hasn't been a huge price adjustments in terms of salaries here, you know, and there's a lot of taxations. So I don't want people to work feeling like they're surviving. I want them to work with their hearts, and they're building a portfolio. They're building upon. So I always say, try to live with a friend. Try to move in with your parents. I know that sounds horrible, but like, I would move in with my parents. They live in Florida, but I don't think that's shameful at all. I think it's a stepping stone to get to the next stepping stone. And it's a good one, by the way. So if you're trying to start your own company, do something you love, get rid of your rent, and then ask your friends. So I didn't realize that even asking your friends is a form of business development. Right now, all my clients are my friends. And it's either because they start as my friend and turn into my client, or they start as a client and turn into my friend. But it doesn't matter. It's all about a trusting personal relationship, right? And so I think that those are the first 3 steps to starting a business. And the reason why I say you don't chase the money is because it takes a while to make money where you feel like you're making like enough. It takes a while for you to understand how to price and charge. It takes a while to build a team. It takes a while to even hire an accountant to even sort your money out.
Do you also mean it takes long enough, like even into your 20s? I mean, your 30s?
Sorry.
Because I think a lot of 30, yeah. Okay, cool. Can you give me 2 minutes? Okay, cool. I'll ask you too much questions. I was going to say, I know a lot of people in their 20s, I mean, they struggle a lot, but they're also frustrated that they're not able to build wealth, et cetera. So do you think that comes really later in life, in your 30s?
I think that, again, we're a different generation from our parents, right? So, like, in a way, I feel like building wealth is different. And I genuinely do think that one of the easiest way to, like, build wealth is real estate. I'm not saying that because I'm in real estate. And actually, I don't own any real estate, ironically, because I own a company. And that's why I'm saying it's a little harder to build wealth now because any money we make, I reinvest it into the business.
Of course.
And that's just that's the way an entrepreneur is, you know? Like, I guess if we were a little smarter.
No, but this is business,
we would buy
right?
our office, or we would have like bought a small property. But we're so focused on growing our business that is our biggest investment right now. So how do you build wealth? Well, it just depends on like what type of person you are, you know? Like, I do think that we definitely spend too much money. Like, our generation or, like, our, like, you know, young people, we're like, our parents just saved. They just saved, you know?
So boring.
Like, we don't...
So boring. What makes you fearless?
Ooh. Honestly, I think what makes us fearless is and I'm super lucky because sometimes you don't choose this, but having a really loving, supportive family, 100%, because you feel like you can take risks because you always have like home to go back to. You can run in back home anytime. Like, I remember if I ever got like my heart broken or anything ever happened, I can go back home. That being said, my parents don't have any money. So if my business goes bust, they're not going to bail me out. But it didn't matter because that emotional support is so much more important than money. Do you know what I mean? So I think it's having a strong family or network. Like you and I are here, we don't have families, so our friends become
Of
our
course.
family. Without that, without that sort of foundation or support, it's really hard to take risks. You're always scared. You don't feel safe, you know?
I literally love having friends of mine on the show because the conversation is so organic. There was so much stuff we didn't get to cover because I didn't rent the studio for like 2 hours. And to be honest, I need 2 hours with Dara because there's so much shit there. I mean, she's like a fucking badass. Also, her son, she literally shares her son's stepmom is Princess Beatrice. So if you know Great Britain and you know the royals, that's a huge, huge deal. I'm going to have her back on the show again very soon to go over even more career-based things. And I will see you guys next week for a new episode of Dare to be Fearless.